It's been a couple of weeks since Season 2 of Castlevania Nocturne took the world by storm, but all Castlevania enthusiasts are still reeling from that banger of an ending. Don't get me wrong, the OG Castlevania series will always stay close to my heart, and no other animated series could dare replace it, but after its rather lukewarm debut in 2023, Nocturne's action, plot, and characters have finally become worthy of its predecessor. Given that Netflix is actively expanding Konami's popular video game saga with more gore, more bloodshed, more action, and way more vampires, I think it's time we took a look at some of the strongest bloodsuckers in the series with just too many vampires. So without wasting another moment, let's narrow down the strongest vampires and vampire hybrids in both Castlevania shows. Before we get too deep into it though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Dracula. It doesn't matter which video it is, but if the subject is Castlevania, you can bet your ass that the Dark Lord's name shall be mentioned. And I mean, of course Dracula's gonna reign supreme as the most powerful vampire in the entire franchise. It doesn't matter what villain comes next, not even Satan or Death himself can compete with the absolute horror spread by the king of vampires. Dracula Vlad Țepeș owned a massive moving castle, commanded multiple mighty generals, and was infamous for ruthlessly crushing anyone who even dared to cross him. This is someone who always disliked humans and their pettiness, but the only person who had the capacity to make him see the remaining goodness in the world was his wife, Lisa. However, after Lisa was murdered under the wrongful accusation of being a witch, a heartbroken Dracula went mad with rage and mounted an indiscriminate assault on the whole of Wallachia. By Season 2 of Castlevania, we saw that Dracula was suicidal and was even willing to sacrifice his eternal life if it meant taking humanity down with him. He had become so hopeless that for him, the world had gone beyond the point of redemption. Even then, Dracula lived up to his infamous reputation, and perhaps most impressive was the fact that he was literally starving, as he hadn't drank blood for several months because of how mentally broken he felt, yet in Season 2 of Castlevania, he was still able to overpower Trevor and Sypha before engaging in a long, hard battle against Alucard. As a sorcerer, Drac was capable of turning hordes of humans into dust, and after he had Hector and Isaac's knight armies supporting him, the Dark Lord became invincible. All the vampires in his court were more scared of Dracula than they were of anyone else because his strength far surpassed that of regular vampires. Not only that, he was also immune to the most common weaknesses, including a lust for blood, which many others of his race also suffered from. And lastly, Dracula's demise was a heartbreaking suicide. You have to understand that Dracula willingly got himself killed when he took a step back to finally grieve his wife, allowing Alucard to put a stake through his heart. So, if the Vampire Lord hadn't come to this sudden self-reflection on his monstrosities, he would have most definitely taken down the super trio with ease. Not just that, at the end you really see it in Dracula's eyes. The guilt and the shame of failing his wife and his son. The way a man of his stature just crumbled and gave up. It was definitely an act of suicide. Had he decided to fight back, Alucard would have had to go back into hibernation for another decade.
I am Alucard, son of Dracula.
Alucard! Adrian Alucard Țepeș is the dhampir son of Dracula and his beloved wife Lisa. Because he carries the best of both worlds in him, Alucard represents the duality in his progeny and understands why his father needed to be stopped from eviscerating the entire world. When he attempts to reason with Dracula, the father and son get into a one-on-one fight, which Alucard loses. He later teams up with Trevor and Sypha to confront his father again and manages to succeed in his mission at the cost of being stuck with the lifelong guilt of patricide. For me, Alucard is undeniably the most iconic character in Castlevania. His trademark soft voice, coupled with his immense prowess, make him just the ideal vampire, and his abilities only make him cooler because his strength is derived from both his human and vampire lineage, placing him among the most potent beings in the franchise. Time and again, Alucard has demonstrated his proficiency in battle, whether it be against night creatures, vampires, or even godlike beings. The dhampir has a plethora of tricks up his sleeve, from turning into a white wolf and a bunch of bats to creating energy blasts. He also wields a magic sword that can cut through pretty much everything, and unlike mainstream vampires, he can comfortably roam under the sun like a regular human. Agile, nimble, and strategic enough to anticipate his opponent's moves, Alucard is arguably the most powerful vampire by the time of Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. Yet, even after 300 years, we see how the shadow of Dracula still looms large, forcing him to walk the tightrope between humanity and vampirism time and again. Still, even in the most intense situations, we see how Alucard rises as the embodiment of his father's strength and his mother's emotional intelligence, which really is his strongest feat as the only being of his kind.
Before she grinds its bones to dust.
Drta 20s. Before Drta underwent multiple power upgrades in Season 2 of Nocturne, she was just a vampire sorceress and Erzsebet's most loyal servant. While Season 1 left her backstory super ambiguous, we recently found out that over 1,000 years ago from the time of Nocturne, Drta was a priestess for the god Sekhmet in ancient Egypt and became a vampire after a band of bandits attacked and slaughtered everyone in her temple before stealing Sekhmet's mummified corpse. Ever since her transformation into a vampire, Drta formed a cult for the goddess and spent the next few centuries looking for someone powerful enough to drink Sekhmet's blood until she finally found the perfect vessel in Erzsebet Báthory. After turning Erzsebet into the vampire messiah and a goddess-like being, Drta became her most trusted general, manipulating her every move. I mean, she served the queen's right hand for a reason. To appease Báthory, Drta's sadism had no limits as she hunted down young boys and girls to offer to the vampire queen. Not just that, she loved to watch the weak suffer and reveled in their fear. But after dying at Alucard's hands in Season 1 of Castlevania Nocturne, Erzsebet ordered the Forge Master Abbot Emmanuel to revive her as a night creature, and so Drta returned as a night creature vampire hybrid in Season 2. Now, she was more powerful, cunning, and brutal than ever, easily making her the most powerful vampire in Season 2. Plus, her ruthlessness also translated well into battle as she killed people for sport, like the entire French Revolutionary Army she brutally hunted down in broad daylight. While Drta loves the bloodshed, she's also intelligent enough to know when and how to attack. Throughout 2 seasons, Drta battles everyone from Richter to Annette, Olrox, and Alucard. At times, she even bested them and gave them a run for their lives. In her last transformation, when she betrayed Erzsebet by absorbing all of Sekhmet's power from her body, Drta reached the peak of her abilities because she was now a vampire night creature hybrid with the power of a goddess within her. Luckily, she couldn't win against Sekhmet, who used Annette's body to take back both her soul shards from Drta's body, leaving her back in her night creature form. Even then, she was unstoppable, and while she couldn't win against the combined strength of Richter and Alucard at full power, she still gave them the fight of their lives. I mean, she had Alucard pinned down on the ground. Can you imagine? If it weren't for Olrox blasting her with fire and Alucard passing his sword, Richter would never have been able to channel his elemental powers to take her down all by himself. So yeah, Drta literally needed the combined efforts from a super trio to meet her end. After Dracula, if there was a villain close to having such an immaculate aura, it would definitely be her. Erzsebet Báthory. Based on the eponymous real-life Hungarian noblewoman alleged of a grisly string of serial killings, Erzsebet Báthory was the vampire queen who was looking to launch a new world order by eclipsing the sun and establishing a vampire dominion with her mission of camouflaging the world in eternal darkness. In the over 300 years since Lord Dracula's death, she stepped in to fill the power vacuum and fulfill an ancient Egyptian prophecy of a messiah. After Drta turned her and chose her as the vessel for Sekhmet's power, this serial-killing noblewoman declared herself as the vampire messiah, believing herself to be the reincarnation of the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet. And because of her mission to turn the entire world into an open playground for vampires, every bloodsucker on Earth worshipped her. Proud, deluded, and deliciously over the top, Erzsebet was the perfect villain for Castlevania Nocturne. She was also incredibly powerful, not only towering in figure, but also quite capable even before drinking Sekhmet's blood. But once she absorbed the deity, she became a lioness-like being with immense physical strength and the might to cover the earth in eternal darkness. If that wasn't enough, Erzsebet also exhibited considerable magical abilities, including manipulating darkness and casting powerful flame. Her monstrosity only grew to impossible new heights when she consumed Sekhmet's heart and became almost invincible after going through yet another power upgrade. The only way she felt battered was when Richter, Alucard, Maria, Annette, and Just, everyone narrowed down their assault on her for a long period of time. The only reason Erzsebet died was because of how Drta betrayed her at the end by sucking out all her powers after pretending to be her most loyal servant for centuries. While it was fun to watch her lifeless body get kicked into the bushes, if Erzsebet was in her full form, she would undoubtedly have made Drta choke on dust. Olrox! As the first vampire to appear in the spin-off series and kill a Belmont within 10 minutes, Olrox is an Aztec vampire who's faced countless enemies over his long life. Ever since he killed Julia Belmont, the green-eyed vampire became the very source of Richter's nightmares, including his emotional and psychological turmoil. Having walked the earth for at least 250 years, Olrox is a soft-spoken, calculating, diplomatic vampire who's amassed astonishing physical and supernatural skills in combat. While he has superhuman speed, strength, and agility like every other bloodsucker, it's actually Olrox's shape-shifting abilities that garner all the attention. His most efficient tool in battle is being able to transform into a long-necked, snake-like green dragon similar to the Aztec deity Quetzalcoatl, possibly making this one the coolest transformation in the show. In this form, Olrox can fire bolts of lightning powerful enough to even get through Belmont magic. When he was summoned by Erzsebet, Olrox traveled to France to swear his fealty to her, but was working behind her back the entire time to undermine her conquests. Much like Isaac in the OG show, Olrox is something of a resourceful loner who likes to work alone for reasons only he knows. Olrox is also a great manipulator who can brainwash anyone to accomplish his goals. In Season 2, we see Olrox go toe-to-toe with the reincarnated night creature version of Drta, and let's just say if it weren't for him, Richter would have a hard time keeping Drta at bay. Moreover, the sense of confidence and composure this centuries-old vampire carries himself with is simply unmatched. Tera! Apart from being Maria's mother and Richter's surrogate parent after he was orphaned, Tera is a gentle and selfless woman who was a powerful speaker. But Tera had a deep dark secret, and that was her relationship with the abbot who had sold his soul to become a forge master and perpetuate Erzsebet's cause. After the vampire queen found out in Season 1 that Maria was Emmanuel's illegitimate daughter, she asked him to offer her as a sacrifice. Erzsebet wanted to hold something over the abbot's head in order to get him to do his bidding, and according to her, Maria was the source. But in the Season 1 finale of Castlevania Nocturne, Tera makes the heartbreaking decision to sacrifice herself to save her daughter, agreeing to become one of Erzsebet's vampires to spare Maria from the same cursed fate. And after Emmanuel confirms that he loved Tera, the vampire messiah saw herself gaining a very powerful vampire sorceress who could harness speaker magic. Now, after Tera's transformation into a vampire, we see her completely unraveling from her usual soft and nurturing demeanor in Season 2. While she tried her best to stay rooted to her humanity, after becoming a vampire, she became somewhat unhinged, calculating, and manipulative. She was so powerful that even as a new vampire, Tera could best a seasoned vampire hunter like Juiced Belmont. But after manipulating Maria to embrace her dark magic and killing her father, Tera realizes what she had become and grows more reserved, keeping her distance from Maria out of love and a desire to protect her. In Season 2, Tera doesn't have much screen time, but from the glimpses we get of her in the show, we can tell she's going to be quite a dangerous vampire in Season 3, especially with Old Man Coyote pulling her strings and manipulating her to do his bidding. Carmilla! After Dracula, the OG Castlevania show had several great villains, but nobody was as badass and unhinged as Carmilla. I mean, for me, Carmilla walked so Drta could run. As the Queen of Styria and the leader of her Council of Sisters, Carmilla was one of Dracula's most ambitious generals. Her main agenda was always to gain more power, and she was just cold and calculating enough to go to any means to achieve it. After Dracula died in Season 2, Carmilla was quick to step in and try to fill that power vacuum, thus rising as one of the main villains of the show, based on the eponymous character who is widely considered as the first in vampire literature, predating even Dracula. Carmilla enslaved Hector and dragged him barefooted to Styria in order to get him to make her own night army. Also spent the majority of Seasons 3 and 4 planning to bring her down because this woman was incredibly powerful and capable of bringing entire armies to their feet. Her entire life has been a quest of bringing down stupid old men and seizing their power for herself. After she returned to Styria, Carmilla used her intelligence to plot the expansion of her territory and enslave a large number of humans. Plus, her calculative scheming is charming enough to fool even the best vampires, which is why she is the one leading the Council of Sisters. As a skilled swordswoman, Carmilla was excellent at hand-to-hand combat and took moments to pin Godbrand down to the ground. During her climactic battle with Isaac, Carmilla was able to defeat countless of Isaac's night creatures while keeping him at bay, all while being wounded from battling a previous horde of night creatures. She even overpowered Abel, and while she didn't have any magical abilities at her disposal, Carmilla was astoundingly fast, to the point that she emitted sparks of lightning after reaching top speed. At her peak, few vampires could compare with her because even at the end, Carmilla refused to fold. When she decided to end her own life instead of swallowing her pride and bending her head to Isaac, even Carmilla's death resulted in a massive explosion that was strong enough to wipe out scores of Isaac's night creatures. Striga! Striga is one of Carmilla's 4 sisters and the leader of Styria's army of vampires. As Styria's greatest vampire warrior, Striga is a muscular woman of towering height while being soft-spoken, cunning, and precise. Even though she's famous for her immaculate battle strength, she doesn't have the same zeal for bloodlust as Carmilla does. I think she's a brilliant military strategist who knows when to pull back, but still, we see Striga take a direct approach as she's well aware of the fact that war demands blood to be shed, even though she tries her best to avoid outright slaughter or devastation when possible. Her tactical acumen and combat skills stood as the pillar of strength within the ruling body of Styria. We really get to see her well-earned reputation as the greatest warrior when she takes on an entire army of humans by herself without so much as shedding a single drop of blood in broad daylight and effortlessly cleaving through countless enemies on the battlefield. While she's not immune to the sunlight, Striga wears unique armor that protects her from it, thus making her one of the few vampires capable of fighting fearlessly under the daylight. This rare advantage, combined with her unrivaled martial arts expertise, cements her position as one of the most powerful forces in the Castlevania franchise. Striga also has the regular powers of vampires, including superhuman senses, speed, and strength. However, because of her large build, she's mostly stronger than any other vampires, which allowed her to easily slice her way through an entire army of human attackers at one point. But like I said, Striga knew when to pull back. After realizing that Isaac had taken Styria and killed Carmilla, she and her girlfriend Morana decided to leave and start a fresh life by forging a new path for themselves as mercenaries. So, while Striga might not be the mightiest vampire in the world, she's definitely a mighty opponent. Dragan! Dragan was an extremely powerful vampire lord whose main motive since his introduction was the resurrection of Dracula. After Dracula's death, Dragan seemingly took control of his scattered vampire army and was seen commanding multiple troops and creatures in the assault on Dracula's castle. He was also the visionary who saw the potential of combining magic and strength, which became clear when he recruited vampire witches to help execute Saint Germain's grand plan. Despite being ordered around by Saint Germain from time to time, in combat, Dragan has shown to be one of the more powerful vampire warriors in the series. He held his own against a combined force of Trevor, Alucard, and Sypha, and was only defeated after an attack that combined the strengths of Sypha's fire magic with Alucard's steel sword. Lenor! Lenor is one of Carmilla's sisters and the diplomat of Styria. She's also the gentlest of the 4 and possesses an elegance that belies her cunning nature. With a gift for words and manipulation, she weaves her web of influence, ensuring that Carmilla's plans come to fruition. Her charm, both an asset and a weapon, allows her to negotiate with foes and allies alike, always with the Council's interests at heart. Using her charm and manipulation, Lenor forms a certain bond with Hector, something akin to romance, if not necessarily love, and eventually enslaves him using a magic ring. Still, when Lenor interacts with Hector, we see a more intricate side of her and their evolving relationship, brought with power dynamics and genuine affection, revealing the nuance of her character. As the diplomat of the Council of Sisters, Lenor prefers to fight by manipulating and exploiting others' weaknesses. Basically, words, not fangs, are her weapon of choice. She's a capable vampire with several abilities, however, she wouldn't be much use in a one-on-one fight against another vampire. Lenor isn't a pushover by any means, but her skill set is best utilized in more formal circumstances. In the end, she commits suicide after Isaac defeats Carmilla because for her, staying alive as a slave was a fate worse than death. Cho occupied a reverend seat in the vast chambers of Dracula's court, and as a Japanese vampire warlord, her presence was as much about strategy as it was about strength. While she seemed like a harmonious embodiment of elegance, her ruthlessness showcases the duality of her nature. As a vampire, Cho's lifespan exceeded that of a normal human, allowing her to live for hundreds of years behind the walls of her fortress. She loved to hunt and was able to outmaneuver her human foes by catching them off guard, giving her the chance to take them down. In her court, Cho would often have humans fight one another, and the warriors who emerged victorious would then have to fight her to her amusement. In the court, Cho was always quiet and showed unwavering commitment to Dracula's desire to see humanity's end. What makes her super powerful was her ability to transform her physical form into mist, making her intangible to certain physical effects, such as Alucard's sword. In this form, she could disperse herself to stay hidden from her enemy and also fly. Lastly, Cho could emit poison from her palms, presenting itself as a purple vapor. However, she was very unsuccessful during the 2 times she used this ability, largely due to the lack of speed that the poison moves at. All in all, she was pretty powerful, but still not as prominent as the other vampires of this list.
Flying rat.
Comte de Vaublanc. So, Vaublanc is a narcissistic vampire lord with a sense of superiority, possibly for being a vampire, but also possibly due to his vast wealth. He controlled the lives of many families and was their master. In general, he has a somber demeanor as he usually talks calmly and in a low tone, but Vaublanc is also very irascible and intolerant, lifting his voice and resorting to threats at the slightest provocation. Plus, he's a sadistic bloodsucker who often savored the moment before he killed someone. However, despite his sadism and arrogance, he's rather cowardly as he fled at the first sign of danger and panicked when he found himself trapped during his final moment. As a vampire, Vaublanc has developed the usual skills associated with the species, such as enhanced strength, speed, and agility, but he also has very heightened senses, particularly a highly refined sense of smell, which allowed him to track and pinpoint living targets among crowds and even some inanimate objects such as magical charms. Like many others of his kind, Vaublanc could shapeshift into a bat when he needed to run from a battle. During the scene where he fights Annette in a graveyard, a bat can be seen flying in the direction where he's found moments later. However, it isn't specifically shown if that's actually him. Moreover, in both fights that he was involved in, Vaublanc was shown to be very resourceful in combat and often employed punches and kicks with well-studied techniques. Godbrand. Godbrand is a boisterous and hot-headed Viking vampire who is one of Dracula's most trusted generals in his war against humanity. His brash nature, combined with a warrior's instinct, made him an intimidating presence on the battlefield. His love for fighting and chaos is apparent in every move, making him unpredictable in combat. With a preference for axes and brute strength, Godbrand relished in the carnage, often taking the front lines and enjoying every moment of it. His favorite thing on earth involved the pleasures of raiding and pillaging, as most Vikings do. However, as a fighter, Godbrand was powerful enough to survive for over 500 years, probably, give or take a few. However, Godbrand is also proud, overconfident, and not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, meaning any physical prowess he possessed was still undermined by his sheer lack of conscience and common sense. Yet Godbrand also had moments of clarity, understanding the long-term consequences of Dracula's plan to annihilate humanity. He saw the pitfalls in wiping out the human race primarily because they were the primary food source for vampires. This strategic insight and his combat prowess set him apart from the typical mindless warriors. However, his tendency to voice his disagreements and concerns didn't always endear him to the higher-ups, sometimes landing him in precarious situations. Eventually, his big mouth got him into trouble and he met his end at the hands of Isaac, who believed that he was about to betray Dracula. Ratco. Ratco is a vampire who's lived for at least 3 centuries and is a war expert with an amazing talent for killing and taking great pride in his skills. And mind you, in the world of Castlevania, few characters can match the sheer power and combat skill displayed by Ratco. This vampire's unwavering pride in his abilities isn't misplaced either, as he consistently demonstrates his strength. Ratco's strategic partnership with Varney, focused on resurrecting Dracula, highlights his cunning nature and determination to achieve his goals. However, his main aim as a member of the partnership was to find the underground court. Ratco made his first appearance relatively late in the series, but in that short time, he displayed his proficiency in combat greatly. As a vampire, he has the basic superhuman abilities of his type, including enhanced senses, speed, strength, and the bonus of immortality. However, he also has heightened combat knowledge and is a skilled soldier with centuries of fighting experience. From the moment he appears on screen, Ratco establishes himself as a dominant force, effortlessly overpowering his adversaries with unparalleled swordsmanship. Even when faced with a strong opponent, Ratco emerges victorious, proving his place among the best in the Castlevania universe. He even got the better of Trevor Belmont in a sword fight, though granted, the latter was greatly fatigued. Morana. Morana is the oldest member of the Council of Sisters and is likely thousands of years old. As a reminder of older times, she wears a Kanake-styled shawl, which could be a hint to her having Mesopotamian or Persian roots. She's also the chief administrator and organizer of Styria, making her in charge of running the kingdom while Carmilla is away. However, she was seen as someone who was afraid to share her honest advice with Carmilla. Still, Morana was highly cruel, and she often used torture to get her way with enemies, or sometimes just for fun. Being the one who kept Styria running, Morana always had to be in close correspondence with Carmilla, so they were sort of close. She was also the first to embrace Carmilla's plan and help to align Striga with it. Being focused on the present, Morana was Carmilla's prime agent in making her dreams a reality, but as seen during her and Striga's logistical survey of the lands that Carmilla desired to conquer, Morana was shown to be the most realistic of the four. This was seen when she quickly realized the impossibility of Carmilla's conquest using force, because only a peaceful method of conquest would allow such a plan to work. Morana was also the first to realize that the immense administrative and logistical difficulty of conquering and policing an area that was essentially nothing more than open fields and forests where humans could easily escape, hide, and regroup for thousands of years was practically impossible. Later, she herself admitted that she had only thought that Carmilla's plan made sense because she was taken in by the latter's charisma. Still, Morana's greatest feat is knowing all aspects of how a kingdom is run. She's well educated on how effective empires were run in the past and takes inspiration from that while planning Styria's growth. Moreover, given her position as the main administrative official of Styria, Morana was shown to be a highly skilled accountant and is implied to be the one in charge of the country's commerce, economy, and wealth. This is seen during her conversation with Striga in acquiring more help for their endeavors via mercenaries, where Morana had already calculated the exact amount needed to bribe them to switch sides to instead help them instead of their enemy nations. Morana has also been the one implied to handle funding for Styria's armies and government and is responsible for allocating the needed funding for its day-to-day needs and activities. While her tactical and strategic strengths know no bounds, unfortunately, Morana was useless in the battlefield, as seen when Striga was fighting a mob of humans in broad daylight while she hid in a coffin. So that was our pick for the top 15 most powerful vampires in the entire Castlevania series. Who are your top 5 picks from across both shows? We want to hear about them in the comments section down below. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.